Welcome to a new episode of the Cricket Paper Podcast, where Mohan and myself will once again be looking at some key talking points from the 100 before moving on to our next Ashes segment, which is the middle order for both England and Australia. So if we just get straight into it with the 100, getting towards the business end of the competition now. Big game this evening between the top two, Oval Invincibles and Trent Rockets, where the winner will all but qualify, though suspect this could quite easily be a rehearsal for the final, judging by the performances so far. Looking at the Oval Invincibles, Mohan, as strong as expected really from a side that has dominated this tournament the past two seasons. A couple of notable performers to pick out. There's Tawanda Muyeye at the top of the order, who's had a brilliant blast campaign for Kent and has carried that form on. But also Jordan Cox, who's been impressive with nearly 200 runs and striking at over 180, and a player who is very much on England's radar.
Yeah. I think Oval Invincibles, like you say, just carrying on from where they've left off the last two seasons. I guess they found a winning formula and sort of a structure for their overall squad that seems to be helping them sort of win consistently now. And I know we're going to talk about sort of some of the shortcomings potentially for Welsh Fire and the London Spirit, but I think whatever Oval Invincibles have at the moment is working for them. And like you say, Jordan Cox has been in the runs, and he was quite unlucky over the winter where he was going to be getting high runners playing for England, and then he had that unfortunate injury. But it's great seeing him back and scoring runs, and I'm sure he's going to be staking a claim to sort of have another shot at playing for England. But like you say, I think it's probably a rehearsal for what might be the final. It looks like basically the three teams that have the strongest squads, I think, are the three teams that are sort of vying for that final position. So I don't think there's any surprises there. It's going to be a good sort of end to the tournament.
Yeah, and Cox as well. I think he scored 130 off about 60 balls at the end of the T20 blast for Essex to help chase down 220 against Hampshire. It feels very much like the reserve batter at the moment. Going to be tough for him to get in England's side. There's potentially a spot at number 3 in the Test side down the line. But in terms of the white ball, when you've got obviously Josh Buttler, Harry Brook, Jacob Bethel, Will Jacks, Jamie Smith, wherever he slots in the side, it's difficult for him. I think that Ireland series could have been the opportunity with a few of the Test players not involved, but that wasn't the case. That we will see more of Tom Banton and Ryan Ahmed, which will be interesting to see because they certainly deserve an opportunity to showcase themselves as well.
Yeah, and I think with Jordan Cox, I think his time will come. I think the white ball side in particular are sort of quite dynamic at the moment in terms of selection. There are sort of new names cropping up every so often. So I think England might go through a phase where they trial a few different players in certain positions. And I think Jordan Cox will be one of those in the future. I think if he keeps scoring runs, he's going to be knocking at that door. It's great to see Rayhan Ahmed. I think just personally, I quite like anytime there's a leg spinner on the scene who can score runs as well. That's quite exciting. Yeah. And he's been having sort of quite a consistent 100 so far, and obviously what he did in the county championship as well. So it's good to see him getting picked for England again after what seems to be quite a long time. It'll be interesting to see sort of if he plays in the final 11s during those series, where they slot him in. Sort of, are they going to try and keep him in that mold that he's been playing for his county and sort of maybe bat him up the order and chip in with a few overs, or will he play sort of in the middle to lower order? It'll be interesting to see sort of how Harry Brook might use him. But that's a really interesting and an exciting pick for him. And like you say, Tom Banton as well. He's been back. He's had a few injury issues as well, I think, Tom Banton. I've often seen him sort of limping and clutching at things, but it's good that he's back scoring runs. And when he gets going, he's one of those players that can really take a game away from the opposition. So, the squads that England announced, they look really exciting, really dynamic, particularly the batters. It's more sort of how they fit 7 or 8 batters or all-rounders because they have a lot of people to choose from. So it'll be interesting to see who they view as their sort of preferred top eight, or their first eight, sort of, when they take the field.
Another player from the Over Invincibles, Sam Curran, had a very good tournament with both bat and ball, as he did in the T20 Blast as well. This kind of follows on really from last week. We touched on Johnny Bairstow and Liam Livingstone, someone who's sort of been in the England squad, and then he's been overlooked for a while now, actually, since Brendan McCullum took charge of the white ball squad. He's not been selected. Jamie Overton is seemingly the preferred sort of seam all-rounder there, although that is an area I think we do look a little short on. It's an interesting one for Curran. I think for me, I thought a few years back he would cement himself as sort of a batting all-rounder in England's top six, almost sort of a long-term successor to Ben Stokes, if you will. But his career hit a bit of a tricky patch after that T20 World Cup in 2002, where he was player of the tournament, sort of going down the franchise route a bit. But he's got age on his side. Do you think he still has something to offer at international level? I mean, it feels like he's someone who does divide opinion quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think skills-wise, he certainly has like everything to succeed at international cricket. He's done it before, like you mentioned in the 2022 T20 World Cup in Australia. He bowled exceptionally. I think with him, his relationship with the England team has been more sort of how England view him, like what they view him, like view his sort of primary discipline. Because we saw when he was in and around the Test team, for example, he ended up sort of having that weird sort of situation where he batted sort of 8-9, but also was only like the fourth or fifth bowler sometimes. So he often seemed very underutilized. And I think possibly that kind of bled into maybe how they viewed him in some of the limited over sides. I know in some franchise competitions, in the 100 especially, but also when he was playing at Chennai Super Kings in the IPL, it looked like they were sort of using him to bat up the order, and his overs were sort of a bonus. I think in the 100 as well, he seems to be batting high up the order, but he is also bowling quite a bit. So I think it's more sort of how Sam Curran himself maybe sort of views himself and like what he wants to be his sort of primary discipline, but also how England sort of see that and how it could fit in. Because I think, like you mentioned, his probably main competition is Jamie Overton at the moment. Now, you would think Overton is primarily a bowler that can offer some runs, whereas Curran seems to be doing both kind of equally well at the moment. So I personally think, like you, that he does still have a future, at least skills-wise. It's more sort of how the management and sort of the leadership group sort of view where he can best slot in. But hit him with that new slower ball, that extra slower ball, I think it could actually be really useful and handy in sort of at international level, because sometimes with like international batters, they're not used to facing something that slow. And I think he showed in that T20 World Cup that, he had like a different style of bowling that worked then. And I think he can still offer something similar even now. So I'm curious to see how they sort of use him going forward.
Yeah, I know we've got sort of Ben Duckett, Jacob Bethel, so we're not short on left-handers. Luke Wood is a pace bowler as well, but it does add to an extra having someone who can sort of float around the order, I think, bat left-handed, and also that left arm angle as well. If we look elsewhere in the tournament, I'd say it's pretty much gone as expected. Northern Superchargers, I guess, could be seen as as a bit of the surprise package. They're currently in third. They've never reached knockout stages before. There's been a few England Test players, batters, who have come into the tournament and sort of struggled to get going. But one player who hasn't is Zach Crawley, who's shown some good form in the shortest format, which is good to see. And I know it's not really a conversation of urgency right now with the Ashes and the T20 World Cup, but you feel like for him, sort of a role in the 50 over could suit him. potentially down the line, and it would keep that relationship with Ben Duckett going.
Yeah, and I've actually, to be honest, been quite surprised he hasn't been considered more for the white ball things in particular. I think his technique and his setup is like made for sort of white ball cricket. He likes to sort of get that big stride in, hit down the ground when the ball sort of isn't doing too much laterally. And, he every time I've seen him bat in a white ball game, he seemed to sort of be really kind of dominating and sort of imposing. And I think, like you say, if England do want something a little bit different at the top of the order, I think Zach Crawley wouldn't be a bad shout, to be honest. He's shown in this 100 what he can do. And again, you made a great point that, given Duckett is one of the openers at the moment for England in the limited over side, if they can, again, team Zach with him, it could end up being very fruitful in the white ball arena as well. But I'm actually really curious to see if Zach gets a bit of a run in the white ball side at some point, because, like I say, his game looks like it's made for sort of white ball cricket where the ball doesn't do too much. Pitches are generally made for batters to thrive generally, and his like technique and just the way he goes about it, I think would be perfect at the top of the order.
Yeah, the World Cup, next World Cup's in South Africa in 2027, so it'll be interesting to see next year as this starting sort of shape plans for that, because Phil Salt has struggled a bit in the 50 overs to sort of build a long innings, and Jamie Smith, to be fair, came in and did a pretty good job. So whether they'll stick with him, we'll have to wait and see. The bowlers, Sonny Baker continuing to take wickets. Spoke about him last week and a potential England call-up. That is now the case. We may see him against South Africa next month, which is always exciting to watch young fast bowlers coming through. In terms of the established test bowlers, Jofra Archer has claimed 7 wickets and hasn't conceded more than a run of ball in his 5 matches, which is a serious effort. Both he and Josh Tong have removed Steve Smith in sort of little early Ashes battles, which is nice to see. But in terms of Tong, 10 wickets in 4 games, not someone who we see much of at all in white ball cricket, but another sort of option for England in the future, obviously with a huge sign of caution regarding his fitness.
Yeah, and I know we spoke about him during the Test series just gone, that sort of inherent unpredictability with Tong, it might actually serve England quite well in the white ball arena as well, where sort of batters look to line up a bowler, but if he sort of naturally comes with variation, I think that can be really handy. I think with England, they seem to be sort of just building, and I know we've touched on this before as well, building sort of a group of pace bowlers that they might want to dip into it regardless of the format. Some of the names you've mentioned and some of the names that have been announced in the various squads, they're all sort of players that have played Test cricket as well, or the style of bowler that Rob Key and Ben Stokes say they want in the Test team as well. So I think from England's point of view, they're probably looking at building sort of a group of sort of 10, 12 pace bowlers that they can choose at any time, sort of in tests or ODIs or T20s. And given how packed the schedules are, and sort of you have a one-day series beginning sort of 3 days after a test series or something, having sort of a group with similar attributes that they can sort of pick and choose from and send to different parts of the world to play in different series, I think would be huge. And I think Tong might fall into that category along with someone like Sonny Baker and the various other bowlers you've mentioned.
If we look now at, as you touched on earlier, London Spirit and Welsh Fire both lost at home yesterday, which means they're both all but out of the competition. Both sides have, they've struggled pretty much every year. There was, I think, one year London Spirit did make the top 3, but in general, these two sides have struggled to get it right. Not great seeing when it's sort of an 18 competition to, you don't want to see sort of the same patterns develop every year, but seeing these two teams struggle, and it is difficult, I think, when you do have a tough year and then you kind of have a bit of a rebuild in the draft. It can be difficult to get that right when you see sort of the Oval Invincibles have pretty much stuck with the same core. for a number of years now.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a wider trend in franchise cricket. And I know, and I'll only just draw similarities with the IPL just because it's been one of the longest running sort of major franchises. But I think a lot of the successful franchises in general, and in the IPL as well, they sort of tend to retain sort of that core, the same core set of players year on year, so that they can maybe build that identity, build that sort of blueprint, and assign sort of clear roles and responsibilities, so that, you know, as these sort of high pressure franchise tournaments sort of take place, where games come thick and fast, there isn't much room for confusion and sort of finding sort of your way of doing things. I think, like you mentioned, probably London Spirit have suffered with the fact that sort of they've had sort of a bit of a turnover with players year on year. And also probably with respect to both Welshfire and London Spirit, I think maybe they're sort of just the quality of players just throughout probably aren't quite at the same level as sort of the Oval Invincibles or Northern Superchargers. I know sort of generally the strong franchise teams generally have a sort of a strong group of domestic players, whatever country that is. And then they're sort of sprinkled on top are the sort of high profile overseas signings. You look at the Oval Invincibles, you look at the Northern Superchargers, they've got either current England players who make up their sort of domestic quota, or they've got sort of players that have been in and around that England team and have that sort of, high skill level. And then they've also got the overseas players, some of whom are current players, like, for example, Rashid Khan is a current player, and sort of that's a great signing. Whereas with London Spirit and Welshfire, probably the sort of the domestic players aren't quite at the same level, as some of those other franchises. And even their overseas players, as good as David Warner and Steve Smith are sort of in, when they were at their peak, they're not necessarily considered the first choice T20 players now. David Warner's been retired for a while. Steve Smith, as great as he is in Test cricket, isn't really the same sort of beast in T20 cricket.
Yeah.
So even sort of those kind of picks, when it comes to their overseas signings, maybe they haven't been as shrewd as maybe some of the other franchises. So I think all things taken into consideration, probably why Welshfire and London Spirit sort of find themselves where they are. You might get away with a couple of wins here and there, but I guess to sustain sort of a high level of performance throughout an entire tournament, I guess you need sort of a stronger core of domestic players and sort of more informed overseas signings, and maybe that's where they've both been found lacking. But what do you think, sort of in terms of their run this franchise, this tournament? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it was with the London Spirit in particular. I think a lot of people's opinion before the tournament was that they were lacking that firepower in the batting. David Warner played a couple of good innings, to be fair. But Kane Williamson, again, as good as a player he is, seemed a bit of an odd selection for a 100-ball tournament. I know he's a very good captain as well. But, there just didn't seem too much firepower there. Jamie Smith was obviously a good pick as a sort of England central contracted player. But then you're looking at sort of Ollie Pope, Ashton Turner in that middle order. When you compare that to other teams, the bowling as well. To be fair, there's Luke Wood, Liam Dawson, sort of decent bowlers again. But you look at who's around them. Dan Worrell hasn't had the same success this year as he's had with the new ball. Richard Gleeson has been bowling quick, but can be expensive. So it's been another frustrating year for them. I think with Welshfire as well, you look at their batting lineup, and on paper it doesn't look bad at all. But I think with such a short tournament as well, only 8 games, if players like Tom Collicam or Tom Abel, who both perform consistently for Somerset, haven't quite got going, it's a very quick tournament. And you don't have time to sort of play yourself into form, really. But yeah, I think for Welsh Fire, I think the bowling doesn't look overly threatening either. I mean, Matt Henry's come in. I mean, he's a very good international bowler, but the rest of the bowling doesn't really look good enough, and I think explains why they're at the bottom again. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see next year, because obviously there's going to be greater IPL influence, and the owners, just how much change there will be with these teams going forward. But yeah, it's not ideal for the tournament when you see sort of the same teams doing well and the same team struggling, because you want that sort of competitive balance, really.
And I guess just one other quick thing from me. We were talking off air as well, and you made a good point that this year there's been quite a clash with the Caribbean Premier League, and obviously the West Indian players weren't eligible to play in the 100 because obviously they've got their own tournament at home, and I guess even some England players probably were conflicted. Like I noticed Alex Hales is playing in the CPL, which if he was playing in the 100, he'd be a huge get for a side as well. So there may have been some players, and even like Quinton de Kock, for example, who probably had to make that choice of CPL or 100. And when you've got sort of high caliber players, obviously playing in a different tournament as well, it sort of, it will affect sort of the structure of some of these 100 teams as well. So hopefully next year the clash won't be as prominent, and like you say, with the IPL influence as well, it'll be interesting to see how some of these teams shape up come next year.
Yeah, I think that is the challenge. The 100, it wants to rival the IPL. So sort of the quality of overseas players is a big marker for that. And there's obviously some huge names this year, as you mentioned, Rashid Khan. I mean, Steve Smith, regardless whether he's T20 is not his strongest format. Still a huge name. Henrik Klassen, David Miller, some big names here, but yeah, you still feel like there are some more bigger names that hopefully we'll see coming in the next few years. So the 100 is continuing daily. There's around a week to go now. Also, keep an eye on the Metro Bank One Day Cup. Some excellent close contests there, and great to see so much young talent getting the opportunity to showcase themselves. But we'll switch our attention to the Ashes now. We spoke last week about the top order, so we'll move on to positions 4 to 7 now. Feel like the build-up will be dominated by sort of who opens for Australia, as we spoke about last week, and sort of the fitness of England's bowling attack. The middle order, both sides look very strong and settled.
Yeah, and I think you used the term, I think last week, that the middle order is probably going to be the engine rooms of like both of these teams. It's going to be where a lot of the batting innings are going to be sort of won or lost, and it's been the case like for both these sides for a while now, regardless of conditions. That it's that the 3 to 7 that have really done the heavy lifting. We're going to see a great showdown. Joe Root and Stephen Smith, obviously probably the two best test batters now, probably going around, and two of the last sort of the Fab Four, as it was coined. And Root has been batting sort of as well as he's ever been batting, and if there's ever a time for him to sort of get that Australia monkey off his back, it's now. His last few tours to Australia, there have been various issues that have sort of maybe distracted from him maybe performing his best. In 2013-14, that great England side was sort of on its last legs, and there were some controversies going on and mid-series retirements, with Graham Swan and so on. And then 2017-18, sort of as captain, he had some distractions with the Ben Stokes incident, sort of, which ruled him out of that tour, and sort of that was sort of a last-minute spanner in the works. And then 21-22, England just generally were not playing great cricket, and there were lots of selection issues and the COVID pandemic. Whereas this time, I think Root will know that he has support for the first time, sort of batting support. He has people he can lean on. He won't have to do all the work himself, and maybe that will free him up to sort of have his best series in Australia yet. Harry Brook is exciting. He's going to be his sort of head-to-head with Travis Head, I think is going to be really interesting because they're both a similar style of player, that kind of player that doesn't really care too much about the situation of the game. They just want to try and get their team ahead somehow, playing sort of crazy cricket shots and taking on some of the best bowlers. So that's going to be really interesting. I find the sort of the number 6 positions for both sides quite interesting personally. Obviously, Ben Stokes, now that he's back bowling, probably bowling slightly better than his sort of batting in terms of outputs, relative outputs. It's going to be interesting to see sort of how Stokes goes. I think his main influence is going to be the captaincy, obviously, and sort of making sure that Baz ball vision isn't lost across the 5 tests, regardless of what happens. But I think runs at number 6 are crucial because, when that Kookaburra ball gets old and the pitches can become easier for batting on, you need to cash in sort of in that middle order. And so runs at number 6 are crucial. I think, Ben Stokes showed in the India series just concluded that, there are still runs left in him. He can still produce innings. It's just if he can string together consistent sort of scores to sort of keep England's totals moving. And then Jamie Smith, I think this is a huge test for Jamie Smith. Obviously, what we've seen of him, primarily in England and a little bit in Pakistan, it's been all really promising things. But I think, admittedly, sort of the pitches he's had to bat on haven't necessarily been the most challenging. This is obviously going to be probably the most challenging sort of set of pitches he's going to have to bat on against a high quality bowling attack. So it'll be really interesting to see how he goes, just individually, sort of technically, but also how he sort of bats with the tail. Because I know, sometimes in these conditions where it's a bit tough for batting, they end up being low scoring affairs, and it's in those games where how the keeper bats with the tail to sort of eke out runs. That ends up sometimes being sort of the difference between winning and losing. I think Jamie Smith has shown that he has sort of a really good awareness when he bats with the tail, and sort of he has a good understanding with some of the England bowlers. And, I think that skill will hold him in good stead in Australia. So I think from England's point of view, it's really exciting to know that they've got a settled batting lineup for once. So now it's just a case of them going out and performing. And Australia, I guess, are in a similar position. Smith, Head, similar to the Root and Brook combination. Bo Webster is going to be interesting. I think, even though he's young in terms of test experience, sort of what he's shown so far has been as good as anyone in that Australian team. And, they've got a lot of uncertainty and inconsistency at the moment, especially in their top 3. And sort of Webster has found himself as one of the key sort of batters recently. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. And also, again, Alex Carey, much like Jamie Smith, sort of soft-spoken like Jamie Smith, but, quietly does the talking with his batting. And again, he's had a great couple of years in Test cricket, and he himself has batted well with the tail as well. So, yeah, the middle orders of both these sides look really, really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting battle there, sort of battle of the wicket keepers, if you will, sort of between Alex Carey and Jamie Smith at number 7. I think Carey's had a prolific few years with the bat, and as you've mentioned, Smith has made an exciting start to his Test career, although I think slight concern that his form tailed off a bit in the India series. I think that's a big test for him as well, having to keep wicket for the whole series as well, and what influence sort of mentally that has on his batting as the series goes on. But yeah, like you say, how they bat with the tail. Carey's become, obviously, he was in the headlines in the last Ashes series, but he's become one of Australia's key players really in recent years. The only decision really for Australia is that number 6. You think Bo Webster is sort of the fourth seamer. He's not really done much wrong in his opportunities so far, so you would expect they will stick with him. Obviously, it depends, I think, on if Cameron Green can bowl. But they used him at number 3. against West Indies, so you would imagine they will stick with that. Steve Smith obviously goes without saying his importance. I think he averages mid-50s against England. But you feel the wicket of Travis Head will be key for England, whereas Smith can sort of grind you down consistently. Head has that ability to completely change the course of a game in a session or two, as we saw. I think it was the first test of the last Ashes series in Australia. He scored sort of a rapid century when England bowlers were making a fight back. So you feel his wicket will be key when they could have a bit of joy up front, as we say. Then with sort of Smith and Head to come, there'll be two key wickets to get.
Yeah, that Smith-Head partnership, I think, so I was looking at some of the numbers. I think they bat together really well. I think they average like 56 batting together with 6 century partnerships and I think 650 partnerships. So that partnership, breaking that partnership is vital for England. And yeah, like you mentioned, Travis Head, his ability, much like Harry Brook and Rishabh Pant, his ability to sort of single-handedly just put his team ahead is going to be sort of a big talking point, I think, throughout the series. He even as recently as sort of the Border Gavaskar Trophy over the winter, where I think it was in the day-night test at Adelaide and at the Gabba, when Bumrah was sort of causing grief for everyone else on sort of tough batting wickets, I think Travis Head got 140 and 152 just off his own back when everyone else seemed to struggle. And just off those 2 innings, Australia basically got themselves in a good position for their bowlers to then obviously go to work. So, Travis Head's wicket is huge because, like you say, Stephen Smith will accumulate and just bat that Stephen Smith way, but it's Head that's going to be the one causing the damage and giving headaches to Ben Stokes if they don't sort of get him out early. And, from England's point of view, going into that first Ashes test, I think if they've got full complement of bowlers are fit and firing, I hope England do hit Australia hard with their best attack, Jofra Archer, Mark Wood, Gus Atkinson, Stokes, and really try and sort of set the tone, especially against someone like Head. Because I think, when it's a bit pacey and sometimes, it's at his body, he can sort of get a bit kind of tied up a little bit. So I think if England hit him hard with that and just give him some things to think about, I think that would be really interesting sort of going forward. But I think one thing we can expect from Head is that he's going to keep going. I think he has the blessing of Cummins and McDonald to do that. So it's more sort of how England contain him if he does happen to get away from them.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, sort of fascinating matchups throughout. Obviously, him and Harry Brook in that number 5 position, but also he's very much compared to Ben Duckett in terms of their role as sort of all format batters. So I'd be interested to see sort of how those two get on. I think the main issue, well, not an issue, but the main area for England in this middle order will be the fitness of Ben Stokes. He was back to his sort of all-rounder best against India, but that did come at a slight cost. We've touched on it previously, but I mean, it goes without saying that we need him the entire series, for his leadership on the field, if anything else. But as we've seen, there's no real like-for-like replacement if he did have to miss a test or two. Brought Jacob Bethel in for the last test and kind of disrupted the balance of the team a bit, because then you've got to get a 4th seamer in. So it goes without saying, really, just how important it is that Ben Stokes is fit for all 5 tests.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's everything Stokes offers, not just the sort of the batting and bowling, like you say, but just those intangible kind of things that, the way he can sort of will his players on to follow him regardless of the situation, that sort of ability to, even if he is feeling some pain in his body, to just keep pushing through. I think those qualities and his ability to just sort of galvanize sort of the other players, even sort of the inexperienced players. Like there's a good chance some of the bowlers that will be playing in this Ashes will be sort of relatively inexperienced and young. Shoaib Bashir potentially if he comes back and is selected. Even sort of, if some of England's main bowlers get injured, they might have to turn to someone like a Josh Tongue, who is quite inexperienced. And it's those bowlers that benefit from someone like Stokes standing at the top of the mark, just sort of, helping them believe in themselves. And for all those reasons, I think you're right. If he does, happen to be ruled out at some stage, I think that's going to be the biggest issue for England, because it's not just replacing the batter and the bowler. It's that other human element of Ben Stokes. And England will hope that for as long as the series is live, that Stokes can stay fit, because I think that gives them the best chance of winning. And this whole Bazball 3-year operation has, as much as they may not admit it, it's been sort of leading up to this Ashes series. A lot of the sort of team remodeling came from Stokes himself, wanting, a battery of pace bowlers, wanting certain players to bat, in the top 3 and so on. It's all come from Stokes and sort of his vision and sort of sticking to that vision. So like you say, him staying fit is crucial for England's chances.
If we just sort of finish off with England's Yorkshire duo at 4 and 5, very exciting to see how Harry Brook, like with Ben Duckett, gets on in their first Ashes series down under. But for Root, it kind of feels an important series for him. I mean, he could average 10 this series, and nobody could dispute the records as being one of the great Test batters ever. But as you touched on earlier, there's going to be a lot of chat about getting that century in Australia, sort of the head-to-head with Steve Smith. David Warner's already had a little light-hearted pop at him during the 100. You just really hope for his sake that he does get that century. But he seemed in as good a touch as ever against India. And obviously, if England are going to have any chance this series, I feel that he's probably going to have to do so a couple of times.
Yeah. I think, firstly, like you mentioned, there's nothing really stopping him from scoring this 100 or multiple hundreds. Like, he's batting as well as he ever has. I think technically he's fixed a lot of things that he, I think, himself sort of identified and wanted to rectify. I know Warner had a little pop at him about the front pad, but he doesn't get out that way as much as he used to. So, he's obviously addressed that. I think, you mentioned he ideally wants that 100, but even if he doesn't get 100, I think there are so many legends in Test cricket that, they have sort of one country where they didn't quite nail it. For example, Ricky Ponting wasn't amazing in India, for example, and even Brian Lara, there are a couple of countries he, didn't quite excel in. That doesn't mean that they're any less great than we sort of see them now. So I think Root will go down as a great. It's more just sort of, just that fairy tale ending kind of angle to it, where, can he get that final sort of 100 that he and the fans want him to get. But I think for Root, the main thing will be, can the team win? And like you say, if England are to sort of stay competitive and put the appropriate amount of runs on the board, again, a lot will fall on Root's shoulders, but I think this time it won't all fall on Root's shoulders. And I think that will be the reassuring thing for him, is that he's sort of Harry Brook, who is, a huge part of this batting unit now. He's got an opening partnership that can, on their day, get them off to a fast start and a good start and get them sort of 80 for no loss, 100 for no loss potentially, which I can't remember the last time England got off to such starts in Australia. And I think that will be huge to sort of lay a platform for Root to then just sort of do what Root does. So, yeah, I mean, a lot will rest at Root's feet, but I think, he's as well equipped as we've ever seen him to finally get that sort of monkey off his back in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. That is all we have for today. Thank you once again, Mohan.
A pleasure, Don. Thank you.
And next week, the 100 will be close to completion. We'll look head to the white ball series against South Africa, and we'll also end our Ashes watch with a discussion around the all-important bowling attacks. Thanks for listening, and remember to please subscribe to the Cricket Paper.